Picture this. You finally stopped chasing. The constant checking of your phone slowed down. The long, emotional paragraphs stopped. The energy you once poured into them, you pulled back. At first, it felt strange, almost unnatural, because when someone is avoidant, you get used to doing all the emotional work. You reach out first. You explain everything. You try to keep the connection alive. And slowly, without realizing it, you become the emotional oxygen of the relationship. Then one day you stop, and something interesting begins to happen inside them. Not immediately. Avoidants rarely react right away. At first, they feel relief. Yes, relief. Because deep closeness overwhelms their emotional bandwidth. When things get too intimate, their psychological armor activates. Distance feels safe to them. So when you stop texting as much, stop asking what's wrong, stop trying to solve everything, their nervous system relaxes. For a moment, they think they finally have space. But then something shifts. Because what avoidants rarely admit, even to themselves, is this. They do feel attachment. They just process it differently. You see, an avoidant's emotional radar works in reverse. When someone is constantly present, their brain registers it as pressure. But when that presence disappears, their radar suddenly lights up. And that's when the missing starts. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Picture them scrolling through their phone late at night. They see an old message from you, a random meme you sent weeks ago, a voice note they never responded to. And suddenly, a strange feeling appears, a small emotional echo. At first, they brush it off. It's nothing, but then it happens again. They walk into a coffee shop that reminds them of you. They hear a song you once shared. They remember a conversation where you understood them better than most people ever have. Avoidants rarely miss someone in the moment. They miss them in the silence afterward, because distance removes the pressure. And once the pressure disappears, their brain finally has space to feel. This is the paradox most people misunderstand about avoidant attachment. They don't run because they feel nothing. They run because they feel too much, without the emotional tools to handle it. Closeness feels like standing too close to a fire. Warm, but overwhelming, so they step back. But when the fire is gone completely, that warmth suddenly becomes noticeable. This is when their mind begins replaying memories. Not the dramatic ones, the quiet ones. You sitting next to them without demanding anything. The way you listened instead of judging. The comfort of your presence during ordinary moments. And something inside them whispers. That was rare, because avoidants live most of their lives behind emotional walls. Their independence becomes their identity. Self-reliance is their armor. But even armor gets heavy after a while. And when the one person who made connection feel safe disappears, the silence becomes loud. They start checking your social media, not obsessively, just casually. At least that's what they tell themselves. They notice when you seem happy. They notice when you're out with friends. They notice when you stop posting sad things and start living again. And something subtle shifts inside their mind. Your emotional energy is no longer orbiting them. You're not waiting. You're moving. And suddenly the dynamic changes because attraction is deeply connected to perceived value when someone is always emotionally available without boundaries. The brain unconsciously downgrades their value. But when that same person becomes calm, grounded, and self-focused, their social currency rises. And the avoidant begins to feel something unfamiliar. Curiosity? They start wondering what you're doing, who you're talking to, what your life looks like without them. And curiosity is the first crack in the avoidant wall. Not guilt, not regret, curiosity. Because curiosity leads to awareness. And awareness slowly leads to missing you. But here's the part most people misunderstand. Avoidants rarely say, I miss you, not directly. Their language is different. You might get a random text, hey, how have you been? Or something oddly casual like, I saw something today that reminded me of you. Sometimes they react to an old story you posted. Sometimes they send a meme. It feels small, but emotionally, it's huge. Because for an avoidant, initiating contact means stepping outside their psychological comfort zone. They're testing the waters, quietly checking if the emotional door is still open. And if you respond with the same desperate energy as before, the cycle repeats. Their radar senses pressure again, and the wall slowly rebuilds. But if your energy feels calm, stable, grounded, something different happens. They feel safe approaching. This is where emotional intelligence becomes powerful, because the moment an avoidant begins missing you is also the moment you must stop proving your worth. You don't need to convince them to care. You don't need to explain your value. Your presence already did that, and ironically, The moment you stop chasing is the moment they started noticing what they lost. This is not manipulation, it's psychology. Human attraction thrives in emotional balance. Too much pursuit creates resistance. Too much distance creates disconnection. But grounded independence, that's magnetic. Because it signals something powerful, self-respect, and self-respect is one of the most attractive psychological signals a human can emit. It tells the world, I want connection, but I don't abandon myself to keep it. Avoidants notice that energy, even if they don't admit it out loud. Because deep down, behind all the emotional armor, they crave something rare. A connection that feels safe, without feeling suffocating. A person who understands them, without trying to fix them. Someone who can stand beside them without demanding emotional control. And when they realize you are that person, that's when the missing becomes real. It stops being curiosity. It becomes emotional gravity. They think about the way you understood their silence, the way you didn't panic when they needed space, the way you saw parts of them most people never notice. And suddenly, your absence becomes a mirror showing them what genuine connection looked like. And here's the truth many people never hear. Avoidants don't change because someone chases them. They change when they feel the absence of someone who respected themselves, because that absence creates reflection, and reflection creates awareness, and awareness is the beginning of emotional growth. So if you're sitting there wondering why the avoidance suddenly came back, why they're texting again, why they seem softer, why they suddenly say they miss you, understand something important. It wasn't the chasing that made them see your value. It was the moment you stopped. The moment you chose your peace, the moment you stopped shrinking your emotional needs just to keep them comfortable, that moment changed the entire dynamic. Because attraction, connection, and human psychology all follow the same quiet rule. People rarely appreciate the emotional presence they feel guaranteed, but they deeply feel the absence of someone who once understood them. And when an avoidant finally breaks, it doesn't look dramatic. It looks like a quiet message, a late-night thought, a small attempt to reconnect. But behind that small moment is a mind finally realizing something it once ran from. You weren't the pressure, you were the safety. And now, they feel the difference.